Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today, our subject is contemporary issues and trends in education. It is lecture number 25, and today our topic is gender inequality. Outlines of lecture are: first of all, we shall study about that what is gender, then gender inequality, and then factors responsible for gender inequality. Now we see that what is gender. Gender refers to the roles, behaviors, activities, attributes, and opportunities that any society considers appropriate for girls and boys, and women and men. Gender interact with but is different from the binary categories of biological sex. The simple answer is that gender refers to the different ways in which sexual differences between people appears differently in different times and places, societies, cultures, and across people's lifetimes. So genders refers to both gendering processes in society and outcomes of those processes. Gender describes the rights and responsibilities that societies considers appropriate for men and women. It refers to social, economic, and cultural attributes and opportunities associates with being a male or female. Gender roles, responsibilities, inequalities, and differences are not the same in various societies. The simple answer is that gender refers to the different ways in which sexual differences between people appears differently in different times and places, societies, culture, and across people's lifetime. So gender refers to the both gendering process and society and outcomes of those processes. Gender is basically an important consideration in development. It is a way of looking at how social norms and powers structures impact on lives and opportunities available to different groups of men and women. So globally, more women than men live in poverty. Now, what is meant by gender inequality? Gender inequality is the idea that men and women are not equal, and that gender affects an individual's living experience. These differences arise from distinctions in biology, psychology, and cultural norms. Some of these types of distinctions are empirically grounded, while other appears to be socially constructed. Gender inequality refers to disparity between individuals due to gender. Gender is constructed both socially through social interactions as well as biologically through chromosomes, brain structure, and hormonal differences. So, if we ask that what causes gender inequality are there, so some of the reasons usually offered to explain the persistence of gender inequality include large abstractions, patriarchy, capitalism, male self-interest, misogyny, and religions. Who is affected by gender inequality? Remember that gender roles and stereotypes impact Victorians throughout their lives. Gender inequality affects everyone, including men. Stereotypes or rules about how women and men, girls and boys should be began in childhood and follows us through to adulthood. So not everyone experiences inequality the same way. If we talk about some examples, so the major examples of social inequality include some income gaps, gender inequality, healthcare, social class, etc. In healthcare, some individuals receive better and more professional care compared to others. So they are also expected to pay more for these services. Gender equality has been prevalent in all societies for centuries and continues to exist even today. An example of gender prejudice is female foticide, and the widespread practice of absorbing female foticide happens every day. The reality of gender inequality in Pakistan, origin of gender inequality, and how to deactivate it. One of the most evil forms of discrimination faced by a girl after marriages is the practice of dowry. Now, there are some of the factors which are responsible for gender inequality. The first one is uneven access to education. According to the world, women still have less access to education than men. And 1 by 4th of the young women between 15 to 24 age will not finish primary education. So that group makes up 58% of the people not completing that basic education. Of all the illiterate people in the world, 2 by 3rd are women. When girls are not educated on the same level as boys, so it has a huge effect on their future and the kinds of opportunities they will get. The second one is the lack of employment. Only 6 countries in the world give women the same legal work right as men. In fact, most economies give women only 3 by 4th the right of men. Studies show that if employment became a more even playing field, it has a positive domino effect on other areas prone to gender inequality. Then job segregation. One of the causes for gender inequality within employment is the division of jobs. In most societies, there is an inherent belief that men are simply better equipped to handle certain jobs. Most of the time, those are the jobs that pay the best. This discrimination results in lower income for women. So women also takes on the primary responsibility for unpaid labor. So even as they participate in the paid workforce, they have extra work that never gets recognized financially. The next one is lack of legal protection. According to research from the World Bank, over 1 billion women don't have legal protection against domestic sexual violence or domestic economic violence. Both have a significant impact on women's ability to thrive and live in freedom. In many countries, there is also a lack of legal protections against harassment in the workplace, at schools, and in public. So these places become unsafe, and without protection, women frequently have to make decisions that compromise and limit their goals. The other one is lack of bodily autonomy. Many women around the world do not have authority over their own bodies or when they become parents. Assessing birth control is frequently very difficult. According to the World Health Organization, over 200 million women who don't want to get pregnant or not using contraceptions. So there are various reasons for this, such as a lack of options, limited access, and cultural or regional oppositions. So on a global scale, about 40% of pregnancies are not planned, and while 50% of them do end in abortion. 38% results in birth, and these mothers often become financially dependent on another person or the state, losing their freedom. The other factor is poor medical care. In addition to limited access to contraception, women overall receives lower quality medical care than men. This is linked to the other gender inequality reasons such as lack of education and job opportunities, which results in more women being in poverty. They are less likely to be able to afford good health care. There's also been less research into diseases that affect women more than men, such as autoimmune disorders and chronic pain conditions. So many women also experience discrimination and dismissal from their doctors, broadening the gender gap in healthcare quality. Then the next factor is lack of religious freedom. When religious freedom is attacked, women suffer the most. According to the World Economic Forum, when extremist ideologies uh, come into the community and restrict religious freedom, gender inequality gets worse. In a study performed by the Georgetown University and Brigham Young University, researchers were also able to connect religious intolerance with women's ability to participate in the economy. When there is more religious freedom, and economy becomes more stable thanks to women participations. The other factor is lack of political representations. Of all national parliaments at the beginning of 2019, only 24.3% of seats were filled by women. As of June of 2019, 11 heads of states for women. Despite progress in this area over the years, women are still grossly underrepresented in government and the political process. So this means that certain issues that female politicians tend to bring up, such as parental leave and child care, pensions, gender equality laws, and gender based violence, are often neglected. Then the next one is the racism. It would be impossible to talk about gender inequality without talking about racism. So it affects that jobs women of color are able to get and how much they are paid, as well as how they are viewed by legal and healthcare systems. Gender inequality and racism have been closely linked for the long time. According to Sally Kitcha, professor and author, European settlers in Virginia decided that work could be taxed based on the race of the women performing the work. African women's work was labor, so it was taxable, while work performed by the English women was domestic and not taxable. The pay gaps between white women and women of the color continues that legacy of discrimination and contributes to gender inequality. Then the next one is society's mindsets. It is less tangible than some of the other causes on this list, but the overall mindset of the society has a significant impact on the gender inequality. How society determines the differences and value of men versus women plays a steering role in every arena. Whether it's employment or the legal system or healthcare, beliefs about gender run deep, and even though progress can be made through laws and structural changes, there is often a pushback following times of major change. It is also common of everyone, men and women, to ignore other areas of gender inequality when there is a progress, such as better representations for women in leadership. So these types of mindsets prop up gender inequality and delay significant change. Then there are some types of gender inequality. So there are many kinds of gender inequality or gender disparity, which are as follows. The first one is inequality in family. The next one is natality inequality. The other one is professional or employment inequality. Then ownership inequality. Then household inequality. Then special opportunity inequalities. So first of all, if we see that inequalities in family, women's works longer than men. In most of the societies, the male stream is the mainstream who argues that women have comparatively advantage in household non-market production like cooking and cleaning for the family that can be called emotional and personal caring work. Based on this thinking, household jobs are then asymmetrically distributed. So women are more valued in home, men are specialized in market-based production. Thus, being the bread earners, males enjoy both power and status. Sigmund Freud suggested that biology determines gender identity through identifications with either the mother or father. While some people agreed with Freud, other argued that the development of the gendered self is not completely determined by biology based around one's relationship to the penis, but rather the interactions that one has with the primary uh, caregivers. According to the non-Freudian views, gender's role developed through internalization and identification during childhood. From birth, parents interact differently with the children depending on their sex, and through their interactions, parents can instill different values or traits in their children on the basis of what is normative for their sex. So, this internalization of gender norms can be seen through the example of which type of toys parents typically gave to their children. Feminine toys often reinforce interaction, nurturing, and closeness. Masculine toys often reinforce independence and comparativeness. Education also plays an integral role in the creation of gender norms. Polygamy is legal for Muslims, and it also exists to some extent among Hindus, particularly in cases where the first wife has not given birth to any sons. Then repudiation is also legal for Muslims. For persons of other religious beliefs, a divorce proceeding have been equal for men and women since 1976. Divorce by mutual consent is legal, but in reality, any woman who initiates a divorce is condemned by the public opinion. For that reason, divorces are very rare. Then, the father alone retains parently authority in Hindus and Muslim families. His authority is partially limited only in educated and urban families. In the event of divorce, the law assures some equality with regards to the child custody, but any advantages granted to the mother in this respect are rarely exercised as divorces are not common practice. The old Hindu traditions favored men in matters of inheritance. Only sons, not daughters, could inherit their parents. After independence, however, these traditions were abolished by law, but in the north, nothing has really changed and women are still deprived of inheritance. Despite the increase in women in the labor force since the mid 1900s, women are still responsible for the majority of domestic chores and child care. While women are splitting their times between work and care of the home, men are pursued into being the primary economic supporter of the home. Despite the fact that different households may divide chores more evenly, there is evidence that sports that women have retained the primary caregiver's role within uh, family life despite contributions economically. So, this evidence suggests that women who work outside the home often put an extra 18 hours a week during household or child care related chores as opposed to men who average 20 minutes a day in child care activities. In addition to lack of interest in homes on the part of some men, some women may bar men from equal participation in the home, which may contribute to this disparity. Then it comes sex ratio. For making gender roles more equal, sex ratio is the ratio of males to females in the population. The primary sex ratio is the ratio at the time of conception. Secondary sex ratio is the ratio at time of birth, and tertiary sex ratios is the ratio of mature organisms. Natality inequality. In this type of inequality, a preference is given for the boys or girls than many male dominated societies have. Gender inequality can manifest itself in the form of parents wanting the newborn to be a boy rather than a. Then professional or employment inequality. In terms of employment as well as promotion in work and occupation, women often face greater handicap than men. A country like Japan and India may be quite egalitarian in the matters of demography or basic facilities, and even to a great extent in higher education. And yet, progress to elevated levels of employment and occupation seems to be much more problematic for women than for men. The example of employment inequality can be explained by saying that men get priority in seeing job than women. Ownership inequality. In many societies, the ownership of property can also be very unequal. Even basic assets such as homes and lands may be very asymmetrically shared. Absence of claims to property can not only reduce to voice of women but also make it harder for women to enter and flourish in commercial, economic, and even some social activities. For example, even through traditional property rights have favored men in the bulk of Pakistan. Household inequality. So there are often enough basic inequalities in gender relationship within the families or the households, which can take many different forms. Even in cases in which there are no overt signs of anti-female bias in say survival or son preference or education, or even in promotion to the higher executive positions. The family arrangements can be quite unequal in terms of sharing the burden of housework and childcare. It is, for example, quite common in many societies to take it for granted that while men will naturally work outside the home, women could do it if and only if they could combine it with the various inescapable and unequally shared household duties. So, this is sometimes called division of labor. Through women could be forgiven for seeing it as an accumulation of labor. The reach of this inequality includes not only unequal relations within the family but also derivatives inequalities in employment and recognition in the outside world. Also, an established fixity of this type of division or accumulation of labor can also have far-reaching effect on the knowledge and understanding of different types of work in professional circles. Okay, this was all about this lesson. Thank you very much. Stay blessed. Allah Hafiz.